I see you. Okay, I'll circle back in a moment. Mayor Marine is excused. Councilmember Mead. Councilmember Merrill.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Nearing is excused. And Labor Representative Norton.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Roberts.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Schwedt.
Present.
Thank you. And Councilmember Wright.
Here.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted to circle back, Mayor Frizzell. I see you're present. Okay, we'll be seeing, I'll check back on your attendance. Thank you so much. That does fill a quorum. And so just to check here to see which alternates we have in attendance, Councilmember Gallagher.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Nearing. Councilmember Payne.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson. Mayor Matsumoto Wright. Chair, that concludes roll.
Okay, thank you. The first agenda item is a public hearing on the 2022 through 2027 Transit Development Plan. And the presenter will be Sophie Luten. If I pronounce that right. Okay, sorry.
Just tap it lightly.
Oh, I pressed too hard. Okay, Lupin, close. Great, so I'm Sophie Lupin, Long Range Planning Project Manager. Just want to give you a quick update on the TDP. So the TDP, as a reminder, is an annual short range plan. It's required by Washington state law. It's a 6-year plan. It gives an overview of our agency, our recent accomplishments, and some of our future plans for the next 6 years. The draft 2022 to 2027 TDP was presented at the June SACD committee meeting and the July 7th Board of Directors meeting. The public comment period for the draft TDP began on July 7th after it was presented to the board. We've received, as of this morning, 5 comments so far via email. Some of the comments we've gotten include requests for more service along routes, questions about specific bus routing, comment advocating for improved bus stop access and safety, and accommodation from a rider. And I believe we just received a 6th comment just before the hearing that I did not get a chance to digest yet. We also issued a SEPA determination of non-significance for the draft TDP that was issued on July 7th, along with issuing the draft document, and public comment on the DNS closed July 21st with no comments received on the DNS. The agency has done outreach on the TDP through social media, news media outreach, and we've reached out to our partner transit agencies and local jurisdictions within the PTBA. Any comments that we receive through the end of day tomorrow via email, social media, today at this hearing, all of those will be taken into consideration as we finalize the draft TDP. We'll bring an updated TDP to the August 17th SACD committee meeting, and then we'll bring it back to the September 1st Board of Directors meeting for adoption. And with that, I'll hand it back to you to the public hearing.
Okay, before we have our comments, did the board have any questions? I just have one comment, if I could. The document has an enormous amount of information in it. And if you just go through it, you don't have to read it line for line. But there's so much information that reminds us how many buses there are, what kind of buses there are, how many routes there are, and gives us information that we can answer when people in the community ask us. So I really encourage everyone to take the time to at least glance through there. Like I say, you don't necessarily have to read every single word, but it will refresh your memory for those things that the staff has already given us over the years. So we have first some verbal comments, and each speaker has 3 minutes. And I want to remind them of that, and I will be calling when we get close down to those 3 minutes. And if Rachel, if you would read off who is going to be speaking.
First, for the public hearing, we have Mr. Joe Kunzler.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Hi, can everyone hear me? Make sure everything's set right. I'm going to be pleasantly brief today. I haven't heard anything from you guys, so I am going to just presume that you can hear me. I apologize, my background wasn't set up in advance, but this is the future of flight. I don't know if I'm going to use my Mark 1 Mod 0 pointer. There is a bus route proposed to go down this Highway 99, and please understand, I'm driving a little while. I'm not a very good driver, but there's a couple Everett Station bus stops here, and I really would appreciate if you had a bus stop there at the top of the hill every hour, or at least every half hour, to connect to the future of flight. It used to be a #1 tourist destination in Snohomish County. And in order to get that kind of tourism back, I think we're going to need a good transit connection. Let's try to share screen again and show everybody how that works. Let me check something here. Okay, share. As you can see on my screen, here's a map of the future of flight up here. You have bus stops here on 525. And then you have this very, very steep hill on 84th Street Southwest that isn't served regularly, and it is a deterrent to having people go to the future of flight here. Everett Transit has very rarely served stops here at 84th 2nd and 44th Avenue West. And it would be nice if we had, a bus go by every hour or every half hour during the day and on the weekends. And also connect to Seaway Transit Center, which is up here. I don't know if you can see it, but that generally is a hub to get the buses to and from Everett and for the Swift Green Line. One last thing on a point of personal privilege. I'm not terribly wild about all this free parking around Boeing, and I think it's time that the Machinists Union was asked to consider the impact of that on their union brothers and sisters who operate your fine buses. I will rest my case there. Thank you for letting me share screen and provide you some unique information. I will thank you, Rachel, for all you do.
Okay, thank you, Joe, for your comments.
Welcome.
And next we have Ms. Sabina Araya.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me the time today. Back in the June and July meetings, I was here to highlight the effects of the vaccine mandate on the current service and future service growth. And I am here again today to request that you either rescind the vaccine mandate or that you hire back and provide accommodations for those drivers with approved religious and medical exemptions in order to restore the service that was cut this year and get the agency back on track in terms of service growth for the next 6 years. I provided some written comments for the draft plan right before the meeting, so I will just outline the main thoughts here. First, that the March service change that is effective through September did not go through a federally mandated and board adopted Title VI process. In this plan, the agency describes the service change on one side as temporary, but later uses it as a baseline for service growth. Of the 20 routes affected by the service change, 8 routes had service reductions between 25% and 50%. And those routes should have been subject to a public process that would have provided an opportunity for customers and the public at large to have input into these major service cuts. It's the same process that you're using right now and this meeting for approving the free youth fare, and the same process that we're using for this TDP plan approval. I'm asking the board of directors and the agency as a whole if the FTA granted an exemption from this process for this major service cuts for those 8 routes, and if so, what was the justification and the conditions for granting this exemption? That information should be included in this plan. Secondly, we're talking a lot about the 2024 network. In this TDP, you'll find about 20% less service for that network than in the approved 2021 TDP that you approved last September, while projected sales tax revenues are up by 20%. So in the 2021 TDP, the plan for growth in service hours for 2024 was significant. It was at 520,000 hours. And in this draft that you see in front of you, that is 95,000 hours less than what you approved last year. And to add some perspective, in 2022, we are back at 2017 service levels. In 2017, you had 131 less staff to support that service level. In the meantime, millions are invested in capital, reserves, innovation, grants. We have millions in grants, and service level in 2024 will not even reach back to 2019 service levels. Lastly, I'll say that from 2021 to 2024, the annual sales tax revenue increases by 20%, service increases by 1.7%. And I would add that people, more than anything, need service on the road. Everything else that we do is secondary, and service growth should be the focus of the agency. When you have service levels that date back to 2017 and you have 130 more staff, you really should think about how you're holding the agency accountable for that service that it provides to your jurisdictions and as a whole to the county. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, is that all we have on the verbal ones? Do we have anyone in room?
Looks like we have one person who's raised their hand.
Okay.
Two people that have raised their hand will move over. Miss Shelley Schweigert we'll start with. And we have a person named Zoom user. If you're able to change that to your first and last name, that would be preferred. We'll start with Ms. Schweigert.
Am I on?
Yes,
Okay,
we
thank
can hear
you. Working with my phone still. Good afternoon. My name is Shelley Schweigert, resident of Arlington and former community transit employee. I was one of 65 religious exceptional employees terminated on December 31st, 2021 without due process. On August 10th at 11 a.m., CT Employee Engagement Manager and ATU Local 1576 has agreed to redo my Laudermill meeting for due process. I'm asking the board of directors to please help me retain my job back and lift the personal policy mandates. And rerouting from where we have been to where we want to go. October 7th board meeting, the CEO notice of vaccine mandates based on President Biden's executive order requiring for federal workers. Eric said this will apply to CT contractors, ST Express, Paratransit Service, TransDev. And Eric said, it didn't feel tenable to me for us to have different standards in different parts of this organization, a constant approach across the board without different standards. but no contractor was mandated. In fact, Washington State Governor Inslee is not mandating vaccines for community transit. The agency falls under the private sector and can choose to restore service and hire them back. All religious drivers and mechanics who were terminated on December 31st, 2021. Resend Eric's vaccine mandate personal policy immediately for the following reasons. There's 8. Number 1, CT vaccine mandate has proven to be ineffective and impacted our community and employees in a negative way. Number 2, 30% of vaccinated employees withdrew from the union because of the mandate. And number 3, the science has changed for 2022. Community transit had 203 breakthrough cases. No data shows vaccine prevent contracting or spreading COVID-19. And the 4th reason is CT vaccination. The vaccine expired in June. January 1st, 2022, CT personal policy requires 2 shots to be fully vaccinated against conditions as a condition of employment. Vaccinated employees' proteins and antibodies expire after 6 months is why boosters are recommended. And the 5th reason is community transit is in violation of their home policy. The personal policy is not fully, vaccinated against COVID-19 because it expired in June. All those antibodies and the proteins expired in June. Number 6, community transit cash park base was not mandated. And number 7, other transit agencies in Snohomish County growing the business with daily ridership supported their employees without mandates. Other agencies did that. They supported their employees without mandates. And the 8th reason is CT personal policy is not aligned for future merger with City of Everett. ATU Local 883 approved contract agreements does not require vaccines as a condition of employment. And I understand that contract is expiring in 3 more years. So they just approved that. So at board meetings, I listen and I learn from all of you board members. And talking about the resolution 1222, respectfully, I do not agree with delegating these powers to the CEO because I believe that it is the responsibility of the legislative body, the board of directors. And I will close with Governor Inslee's HELSA law enacted on May 11th, 2021. HELSA is a job protection for the frontline workers, regardless of vaccination status. And ATU of 1576 and Community Transit withheld HELSA, HELSA information because it would be catastrophic to the agency. Most drivers and mechanics qualify. They qualify and they can stay home with benefits until the state of emergency. So please restore the service and hire them back. Thank you.
Point of order. We need to make it clear that we are in a public comment for the TDP, not for normal board communications from the public. We're way outside the TDP with the last one, and we need to maintain that, please.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, was whether we had anyone else that wanted to speak at the public hearing for the TDP. So do we have anyone else that you know of, Rachel? Okay, so the public hearing is now closed. And we will move to public comment. And I will remind everyone that it is a 3-minute, and I will be speaking up if you get that 3 minutes. So,
excuse me, just I think we should close the public hearing.
oh, I just said.
Oh, okay.
Close it.
You close the
That
public
wasn't
comment.
enough, do I have to
Public
go?
comment, now you have to close it. For the
Oh, I closed the public
public
hearing.
hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, I said it was now closed.
Okay.
So I don't think we would go on to public comments, would we? We've already had the public comments as a part of the hearing, isn't that right?
No, there's more public.
But more,
It's not.
Okay,
On
the
the
public
transit.
comment is different than the public hearing.
Excuse me.
Okay. So we all set, sorry. I didn't say that loud enough. So on the public comment, we did get a written comment from Joe Kinsler. but I believe he's here to speak again. And we have several others. If you would like to call them up, Rachel.
We first have Mr. Joe Kunzler signed up to speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
All right, thank you. I want to be respectful. I know this is a tough one. I just emailed the executive office a note to pass to all of you, and I'm going to read it into the record, just, so we're clear here. I brought up free parking during the transit development plan. It was Sabina Paparia who taught me years ago about the sins of that. I think she's smart, tough, but fair, and I think it's tragic what happened to her, and I agree with her on most things, but at the high risk of making someone uncomfortable in that boardroom, I felt I had to choose between the public disclosure program staff and CEO Rick versus those that want to protest the vax. And I'm like, your health and safety come first. I think we need to leave this in the hands of the professionals and get the politics the heck out of this, because the science keeps changing. We've got new booster vaccines coming in, and politics takes time, especially doing legislation right. And that's why we pay you. I don't think we pay the board high enough per diem to do your jobs, but it is appreciated. I really want to stress that this is not a game. I'm disappointed that we've got board members not wearing masks today. I think and staff. I don't want to cross the line and make it personal, but I'm going to be riding your transit system all weekend wearing a mask, because I don't want to even get this virus, even though I know the vaccines will keep me out of the hospital. I am very disappointed that we've got people that want to play chicken with this COVID, and it's heartbreaking. And while I'm just punting away here, it's also heartbreaking because I'd rather talk about how important it is that you have a code of conduct and that you actually enforce it, because there are some people that it's not a good idea to give them a car, so they don't have a choice. And they need that ride to be safe, not just from the bloody COVID, but from some idiot trying to do drugs on the bus. I haven't had that happen to me yet, and I hope that doesn't happen ever. But please pass the code of conduct. That's really important. I finally, it's such a beautiful day outside. Hope everyone is looking forward to Seafair. I hope you've heard the good news that Flying Heritage Collection is coming back in a new way next year at Painfield. So everyone's excited about that. And as I've said before, I will say again, I'm very grateful for all the hard work and remote meetings and all. I'm very grateful for Mrs. Area's mentorship before the pandemic and help understanding transit issues. And if she's on listening, you can rest assured, Mrs. Area, that I'm having conversations about free parking all the time with people, whether it's Everett Link or Orca Next Gen. I just hope to goodness you're okay. So I'm sorry if I'm a little inappropriate today, but I'm trying to muddle through this, and I think we're all doing our best. I really appreciate the interim chair stepping into the plate and providing some leadership. And I appreciate former Chair Daughtry demanding that transit development plan comments be with the transit development plan.
Joe, we're
Appreciate
at your 3 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am. I will stand down. Thank you for your continued public service, and thank you, Rachel, for all you do. Good to see you, CEO Rick. Thank you.
Okay, the next person signed up to speak was Shelley Schweigert, but I believe she's already made her comments. And so the third person we have signed up is Mr. Peter Mykut. Mr. Mykut? If you're on the line, can you please raise your hand so we can see you? Okay, we'll be moving you over just a moment.
Start video, check test. All right, here we go. You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm Pete Mikett, a driver at Community Transit for over 26 years, and I'm back today to speak about two things. One, Resolution 1222 is on the table, and I support the board decision to rescind the community transit vaccine mandate policy and to rehire drivers and mechanics who were terminated on December 31st, 2021. Our company can restore service that is necessary to get the people from where they are to where they want to go, just as the company mission statement says. I appreciate the board members voting on the personnel policy before passing Resolution 1222 that authorized the CEO to have all powers without an end date. The other item is HELSA. It's the Health Emergency Standards Act, a bill to ESSB 5115 dated May 11, 2021, concerning workplace during a declared public emergency involving infectious or contagious disease. HELSA protects high-risk employees from being discharged permanently, replaced, or discriminated against in the workplace for seeking accommodation related to COVID-19. HELSA, existing disabilities under ADA, the American Disabilities Act, or underlying health conditions such as obesity, diabetes, asthma, etc. The HELSA info line is 1-800-423-7233. CT community transit drivers and mechanics who qualify for HELSA can stay home and receive benefits, I believe, under the union contract, regardless of vaccination status. HELSA is not a medical exemption against COVID-19. Now, Community Transit and ATU 1576 did not notify employees in our mandatory reading of Behind the Wheel, given every 2 weeks. It is my understanding Community Transit has over 203 breakthrough cases this year, and I'm feeling there will be more. I'm giving notice today because I am one of the high-risk employees with underlying health conditions, having diabetes, sleep apnea, and carrying a few extra pounds in the doctor's terms of obesity. I am disappointed that Community Transit has put our employees at risk by keeping from us Governor Jay Inslee's HELSA law. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for your comments. Do we have anyone else in the room with comments? Rachel?
I don't see anyone, Chair.
Okay, so we'll close the public comment at this time. We go to our next item, which is presentations, and CEO Elton Fritz is going to do Employee Service Awards.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? We're coming through loud and clear. Excellent. Let's have a little bit of fun now. We have two service awards today, two long-serving and distinguished employees. I'd like to first call up Greg De Los Santos. Greg, come on up and join me. Greg is celebrating 20 years with Community Transit as a coach operator. Greg is active in the union. He's been a shop steward, working to support the interests of his fellow employees. Former Chair Daughtry may be interested to know that he's also a Navy veteran, so he brings that that sensibility to his work and his leadership roles. He's, I'm told, a frequent visitor to the transportation office, and that his visits are most welcome. I will share with you a short story. When we were in the old Merrill Creek admin building, and I was still relatively new, we were holding regular employee coffees, where we would invite employees to come meet with the CEO in the boardroom. We'd wear masks, we'd sit 6 feet apart, we'd get a cup of coffee and set it on the counter to take with us when we left. And Greg came in and was one of the first coach operators I met. And I will tell you, it was great getting to know him. And he was a loud and frequent voice on behalf of employees, particularly on safety issues out in the field, and relating what the employee experience is out there on the road, particularly during the pandemic. So it was a learning experience for me that I appreciate. In his spare time, I'm told he rides horses in parades, which I'm sure makes driving a coach in traffic seem easy by comparison. He's a family man. He celebrates his roots in Hawaii. His son, Greg III, is a coach operator here at Community Transit as well, so it's a family affair. Greg has been commended by his fellow workers and customers, I believe 7 times in his 20-year tenure, for work in inclement weather, for kindness, generosity, going above and beyond the needs of a coach operator to make sure his customers are well taken care of. He's consistently described by customers as polite, kind, welcoming, and helpful. So anyway, Greg, 20 years, congratulations.
That's what a professional coach operator is supposed to be, right?
Well, you get the mic next, so congratulations.
I hate to say this, but it's in short, I'm going to be retiring after all this time. It always, not a day go by that they ask me, why am I still here? I said, I come to this job to have fun. If I want to work, I stay home. Seriously. But when they find out how old I am, and the jaws just drop. I said, my younger son works here, and he's going to be 53. And they're like, what? Wait a minute, how old are you? You know, we play with that. So it's a lot of fun, and things are getting serious out there as a coach operator. And I look out for my peers, whether I'm on cross patch or whatever, you know, it's a serious note out there, and it's not a game. It's we're getting attacked. The safety aspect of a coach operator has gone down. So that's the sad part. And I got to look out for extended life. You know, at 75, you never know. You know, so I try to make the best of it. I'll let my son take over now. So it's been a good ride. You know, I want to keep my health. So appreciate it.
All right.
Oh,
The official picture.
the official picture. We got some hardware for you. Oh, check it out. There you go. Something from the wall and a pin. Well, I'll let you open that.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, Greg. All right, take
In
care.
the age old Navy tradition, you should have pinned that on.
I might drop it. Okay, next up, Dan Jerome, who is joined today by his wife Diana. Dan is a capital facilities project manager, senior capital project manager. He has been with us as well 20 years and is one of our great contributors to our massive or our growing and robust capital program. Dan is probably best known as the project manager recently for this building that we sit in here today. And he's one of the reasons that this building looks and feels and functions the way it does. He's got a long record of managing other capital projects, the Seaway Transit Center, Lake Stevens Transit Center, Smoky Point. I'm sure I'll leave a few out. But having been here 20 years, having started in capital planning and moved into project management, much of what you see out there in the field has Dan's fingerprints on it. He's an architect by training, and so that positions him well to work with our contractors to make sure they conform to spec, and he pays attention to detail. And I think that's one of his greatest strengths. He makes sure that the contractors deliver the product that the staff and the board have asked for, and they do it with quality and on budget. He's run his own business, I'm told, and he's also an Oregonian, which I appreciate. So anyway, he's got family, 2 sons in Arizona, 6 grandchildren. He's been married to Diana for 43 years, and the punchline today is their wedding anniversary. few of the things that his peers say about him. He takes great pride in his role. He's one of the nicest people that you'll meet in community transit. He's the first person to send congratulations, give thank yous, respond enthusiastically to other initiatives, his coworkers' initiatives. He's appreciated for how much he values and respects his coworkers. And his commitment to the organization and his fellow employees is evident in the building we're in today. So, Stan, thank you for all your work. Appreciate your support. Wow, 20-year pin.
Wow, thank you.
So congratulations to both of you. And Diana, thank you for letting us have him for 20 years.
He loves it here.
Want to say a word or two?
Well, sure. I think I'll never forget the first year I was here. I heard a lot of stories about the great growth of community transit. And from little tiny office buildings to what we had in the Merrill Creek Admin Center there. And so in the last 20 years, we have grown by leaps and bounds. Buildings, public, rather service all over the county and beyond. And I think the last 20 years have been the most exciting, maybe the most rewarding that I've been involved in the architectural field. I've worked around the country on projects, but these that we've done here have been so well funded and worked on with such great staff. We have tremendous staff at Community Transit, and the quality continues to go up year after year. And so really, I'm looking forward to the next 20. And I imagine there'll be a lot of growth in the next 20 as well. And I look forward to being a part of some of that. So thank you very much.
And if we could ask Diane to come over for a second.
I don't want to be between you two.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your service. And Greg, Arlington does have horses in our parades. The last one was the 4th of July. So from now on, I'll be looking for you.
Well, we're doing Ellen for September 10th.
Wow, cool. So the next item is the Innovative Services Program update from Roland Behe. That's also we call the microtransit in case you weren't real sure. So Roland, you are on.
And I'll just give a brief introduction as Kevin's coming up here. So Jennifer Haas, the Community Programs Manager, has been providing regular updates to the board over the past several years as we've been launching our Linwood pilot process and engaged with that community in this Innovative Services Program. Jennifer's not able to be here today, so Kevin is standing in. Kevin's a community transportation specialist on Jennifer's staff. And he's going to provide an update on how we're expanding the Innovative Services Program to additional communities. This is something, as Rick and I completed a recent round of city council engagements around the service area. This was a key element that we were talking about in that process of talking about future service expansion for the agency. And this piece in particular met with a lot of excitement in virtually every city that we were sharing information. So this is exciting stuff, and I'll hand it over to Kevin to tell you more.
Well, thanks, Roland. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the board for the time today. This is a brief presentation. I've got some slides I'll click through as well. You can view up on the screen there. Thanks, Rachel. Innovative Services, just to give you a quick background on what that is and why we're doing it here at Community Transit. we want to respond to industry-wide changes and build ridership, right? So some of those changes that are going on related to the pandemic, some of them are related to changing patterns of commuting and working from home and people's mobility needs as they might work from home and need to make more local trips. We want to make travel easier broadly to fulfill our mission to increase equity and equitable transportation access and to serve unmet needs throughout the PTBA. One of the ways that we can do that is by pilot testing new service models. So we'd like to go into that a little bit more here with these next slides. As we look out across the PTBA and we think about where we are going to pilot these new services and test these things, there's a couple of objectives that we keep in mind. First, we want to serve diverse places and people. We want to fill gaps that exist and expand access, and partner with our local communities and jurisdictions so that we can build something that really reflects the desires of the communities that we serve. Just a quick note about the timeline and the process that we work with to develop these pilots. First, we select an area within the PTBA and determine that community to partner with for a pilot. Next, we move into needs assessment. This is where we work closely with the community working group and we deploy surveys into the community to understand the needs and barriers that people have to their transportation locally. Next, staff will come up with concepts to bring back to the community to get their input and develop service options, and then tailor those options based on the feedback that we get. Following selection of one of the alternatives, we'll move into implementing that. For example, with our Linwood pilot, which you all have been briefed on thoroughly, we are moving into this phase right now. We onboarded our vendor in May, and we're currently working with them to deploy that service and begin testing later this fall. And then finally, after an evaluation, we move into continuing to improve that service and support it for the long term. With our phase 1 pilot, which we'll refer to as the Linwood pilot, we're already, like I mentioned, in phase 4, where we're about to implement. What we're presenting today is a recommendation for 3 additional areas that we're selecting to begin phase 2 needs assessment work. And just a quick note on the process that went into selecting the next 3 pilot areas following Linwood. So we worked closely internally with our service planning and our research analytics teams to examine the areas across the PTBA for their suitability to be in the next phase. We looked at the multiple factors, including population density, demographics, looking at the diversity of populations, looking at the built environment around the PTBA, which can vary greatly in terms of land use and road network, as well as fixed route access, both today and as proposed in 2024, to determine where's the greatest opportunity, where are the greatest challenges going to be that we could address potentially through a pilot project. This map shows our phase 1 pilot in Linwood, which is sort of covered up by the bottom of where those names are, and it shows, thanks, there you go. And then it shows the next 3 proposed pilot areas. So for phase 2, we have Arlington, Darrington, and Lake Stevens as our proposals for the next round of pilot projects. Broadly, we think that these 4 areas represent the PTBA well in terms of those factors that I talked about. They vary in terms of density, population, demographics, and they give us the best chance to develop a toolbox of new technologies or new practices that we can then deploy more broadly around the PTBA as we explore possible future pilots beyond phase 2. In gray there, you can see some of the other areas that we would like to eventually bring pilot projects to, following the learnings that we gained from phase 1 and phase 2. And just to drive that point home a little bit more, you see on the left our phase 1 and 2 pilot areas. Those, as I said, can be a springboard to future growth of innovative services. For example, Linwood, either because of geography or similarities to other areas, can be a springboard to places like Bothell, Briar, Mount Lake Terrace. Lake Stevens what we learned there may be applicable in other towns that are similar, for example, Snohomish, Salton, places like that. A quick note on our coordination with labor and the ATU. So starting off in the Linwood pilot, results from this one-year pilot project will inform a service evaluation to determine the delivery model should the board choose to offer a permanent on-demand service with microtransit. The agency has divided ATU to review the pilot project findings as we get data back from our pilot project. And then for service evaluations for phase 2 pilots, those will depend on the service design that we eventually implement in each area. And the agency will coordinate with ATU as projects develop in these areas. And we move toward possible service evaluations there as well. Our next steps are to begin outreach for these next 3 pilot areas and to set up community working groups in each of the 3 locations. Integrating this work and the growth of this program into the 2023 proposed budget, TDP, and long-range plan so that we have resources to carry this work out. And then to, as I mentioned before, launch the Linwood pilot this fall. We're really looking forward to that. So that's the final slide. Happy to take any questions.
Well, oh, go ahead.
This work? Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. Now you can. I'm just curious. I know you got $1 million to do the Linwood project, right? Have you secured any financing for the next proposed 3?
So yeah, my understanding is that we'll be using a combination of local funds and grants for those projects.
Local funds, meaning community transit's money?
Correct.
Could you tell us briefly how this thing works? I mean, if people call up and say they need service, how late is it running? Is it going to be 7 days a week? How do they call? How long a wait will they have? What if it's out of area? I mean, there's much that personally I really know nothing about, except that, you know, you managed to get $1 million and now you need more money. I have some concerns, which I mentioned at the last meeting. There's a grievance filed over the duty of fair representation suit going on. Who are the drivers going to be? Are they going to be represented people? What are their wages? Can you give us more information? And then I'm finished.
Sure, I can quickly get through some of those answers for you. So to start at the top, so the service area in Linwood is sort of centered around Alderwood Mall and Linwood Transit Center. The vehicle you can call either by calling into the call center from your phone, or you can use an application on a smartphone, and the vehicle will be deployed to you. Our hope, we're going to work with the vendor on this, but our hope is to get it to a 10-minute wait time. So from the moment you hail it via the call center or via your app, you should be waiting about 10 minutes or less for the vehicle to roll up where you are and then take you anywhere else within the service zone. And that map will be something that we publish in print, but also if you're using the phone or the smartphone, you can see the service outline, the zone outline on the map, so you can know where you can travel. The service hours are going to be 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. And we hope to maintain that 10-minute wait time no matter where you are within that time. So we will bring more vehicles on during peak times, and then maybe have fewer early in the morning, late at night if there's less demand. But it'll be responsive to the demand that's out there. We'll have a total of 5 branded vehicles that look like a community transit, a vehicle, but it'll have special branding and colors representative of community transit on it, community transit logo. The vehicles and the drivers are provided by our vendor, which is MedStar Corporation. I cannot speak to their wages, but I can come back with that information if you'd like it.
That's all you have. Thank you.
Sure.
I got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
So where you have the growing innovation services, where you show phase 1 and 2, Linwood, Livestreams, Arlington, Darrington, then you show the comparable areas. So if I if I'm understanding this right, we're basically gonna have 4 pilots, and after the pilots either prove or disprove their viability, we can just basically move into the other areas under the pilot guidelines that we learned. And those will no longer be pilots, they just be getting a service in those areas.
That's right. I think that after the phase 2, we would have that toolbox like I described, where we wouldn't have to necessarily go through a full, that 5-step, that 5-phase process of rolling new service out. We could do it much more quickly at that point because we would have had a proven pilot project already prove itself. Potentially, we can do that more quickly.
And so the other thing I have a question about is you just told board member Norton that they're gonna be within an area in Linwood around the Alderwood Mall. So I said, that's the only places they're gonna go. So I would assume that one of those things that they would be doing is also taking somebody to a transit location and get them on a bus to go outside that area.
That's right.
And are those gonna be like a primary function?
One of them, I think that the first last mile problem people might have accessing fixed routes is one that we want to address with microtransit. So, because we know that there's a lot of potential customers that just don't live walking distance to a fixed route. If they did, they would be riding. So this can help solve that gap and get them to Linwood Transit Center. The service zone is going to intersect with 2 pairs of Swift stops along Highway 99, and obviously multiple local routes within the service area that people can get to more easily. We've heard from people in the community working group that there are areas here in Linwood that don't have great sidewalks, and that might be one of the impediments to people using our fixed routes if they don't feel that they can walk safely or roll safely to and from their home to the fixed route. So this could bridge that gap between their home or their workplace and their fixed route.
So even if somebody like Stevens working group doesn't bring that particular thing up, I can make sure that that's exactly a problem we have like Stevens.
Yeah. Thank you.
Jan, I have a quick question.
Okay, go ahead.
So I understand how that would work in Linwood, but out in more rural areas like Darrington. So what would that look like in Darrington? Would you go up down old roads and bring them into the bus stop? Is that primarily the way that would work? Or you're not going to act as a taxi service necessarily?
Well, right, and the first step is to go out to Darrington and just listen. And get the community together, listen to elected leaders, listen to the community, and then find out what the needs are. And if we need to get out there and go up some of those sorts of roads to grab people and get them down to town, we can. That would be one of the alternatives that we might present. Come back, tailor it, and then deploy something that works for everybody.
Yeah, I would think this. I see this working well both in areas like Linwood where there's a lot of transit, but you get out in Darrington and in Stanwood and places, there's more than just sidewalks that impede, getting into transit. So I'm excited to see what that would look like in a more rural area too. Thank you.
Yeah, I just, this is Molly. I want to highlight the next areas that we're going into, like Kevin said, is really just to listen and learn. There is no guarantee that what we will hear will be something that focuses around microtransit. It may be something completely different. And so that's what we want. That's why that first step is really important, is to understand the needs.
Okay, Tom has a question.
As part of your rollout planning, I want to give a little more definition on that. So you talked about the 4 areas you go into. Would your priority be to deploy into those next test phases and then out into other communities? Or at what point would you begin expanding service within Linwood itself? What would be your priorities in there?
I don't know if I can give a very great concrete answer to that because we're just at the moment of about to deploy in Linwood. I think we're going to need to get into it, see how the service rolls out, do an evaluation after a year of operation, and then see, are we ready to expand? Can we do a geographic expansion within Linwood or to a nearby area? But I don't know that we're going to have an answer to that right away. I do think that, as I brought up earlier, as after we develop these next slate of pilot areas, it will speed up the process for the phase 3 and 4 and future expansions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, one more. I'm really interested in this because I think it's a great thing for us to do. I mean, that, I'm, all in favor for it. So we do the Linwood one, we do Lake Stevens, Arlington, Darrington. Do you see that this would ever become just a one size fits all? Or do we think we're going to have basically these 4 different types of microtransit, or maybe more?
Yeah, no, I think there will be several different tools that we develop, and hopefully we find a variety of things that work in different settings that then we can deploy where appropriate around the PTBA. And one of the beautiful things about our area is that it's so diverse. We have small towns, rural areas. We've got some of the most dense, population areas in the state as well. So there isn't going to be a one size fits all, I think, for absolutely everywhere. We'll probably have 2, 3, 4 potential solutions that we discover work well. And it's just a matter of finding those places that they fit best and deploying them there at the right scale. Yep.
Okay, just for clarification, it's not just going to take them to a transit stop, correct?
That's right.
It's going to take it to other, because the first thing that I thought of when I saw Darrington on there, we have 2 buses, one in the morning, one in the evening. And there's a whole bunch of elderly and disadvantaged and handicapped people out there who need to get to doctors, and where they come is Arlington.
Yes.
So I can see where every city would be different in what their needs are.
For sure. And
Yeah.
we heard, and so to answer the question, yeah, it's a point-to-point model where you could pick any point within the zone to be taken. Right. So it could be, your friend's house, the doctor, the mall, the transit center. Well, we heard from the community working group in Linwood that they wanted that flexibility and not to be limited in where they could go with this. So we made it truly flexible for the customer to go exactly where they need to go. Get dropped off at the precise address that they enter.
Right, and for some reason in North Snohomish County, Arlington now has so many medical centers and hospitals, and everyone's coming in. We've even got brand new ones coming in now. So, and it's a hub for it other than Everett. So anyway, no, I'm excited. This is really going to help a lot of people. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, our next item on the agenda is CEO's report. And can I say, I really appreciate Moon's idea was to type up the report and give us a written copy, but I appreciate that a lot, because I like to be able to read it later when I get home. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was Mayor Marine's proposal as incoming chair. I think he felt it might make the CEO report pass more quickly if we had a written version.
Will you take as much time?
I want to thank the board for its questions and comments on the previous topic. It was a great discussion, and I just want to reiterate that whole program is designed to learn and to be adaptive to the context of each of the communities we're serving. And really, it's focused on trying to figure out how we can grow ridership and bring more people into the transit system overall. So we see it as an opportunity to continue growing our market share and make it easier for people to choose transit and then get into our local network and find their way to light rail or to events or to employment or whatever it is using our fixed routes and our BRT system. So that's the theory, and we're really excited to see how it goes. A few items to update the board on. Beyond that, our zero emission study is well underway. We are moving briskly through the first phase of our study, and we've completed a number of site visits to peer agencies to look at how they are deploying battery electric and hydrogen electric vehicles within their systems. We visited Everett Transit, King County Metro, our neighbors to the east, Link Transit, who, believe it or not, is the first transit agency in the state to use electric vehicles and have been using them for 10 years. They're on their 4th generation of electric vehicle already. We've been to Sunline Transit in California that's using hydrogen, and we'll be visiting Foothill Transit in California next month. So we're learning a lot. We've had the PUD over for a tour of our facilities and for some initial conversations about how we might partner. And we've also received our first grant. We got a green grant from WashDOT to help underwrite the costs of the phase 1 study. So we're looking forward to bringing back to the board this fall some preliminary findings, how it might look to deploy such vehicles within our network and some of the issues we need to consider before committing to implementation. Moving on, the van pool program, I reported to executive committee a couple of weeks ago. We're making some changes to how we deploy that program. That was one of the hardest hit services in our repertoire. We saw a 55% decrease in vans since the start of the pandemic. So we're making a few tweaks that we think will make that tool more attractive and easier to use for some of our patrons. We're shifting to a minimum requirement of 3 days of the work week schedule instead of the current requirement of a 4-day schedule. And we're lowering our occupancy requirement from 5 people to 3 people. We've gotten feedback from our customers and many of our former customers that these sorts of changes will make it easier for them to put van pools together. And so we've implemented those changes effective August 1st, and we're looking to see a market response to that. We'll obviously keep you posted, but it's another of our many efforts to adapt based on how the pandemic has changed the way people are using our services. Next, a quick update, long-range plan. Journey 2025 is well underway. We've completed another round of public input on our priorities to grow and serve the community from 2025 on through 2050. We're looking to align our long-range plan with the PSRC's long-range growth strategies. We have just launched another round of public engagement effective July 25th, and we're asking people which types of service they'd like to see in the future, which mix of services between fixed route, BRT, innovative, and other services. So we've posted an online survey that's here in the report, and we've shared that with your jurisdictions as well. We'll be updating the board on the results of that survey this fall, and we'll use that to input a draft plan that we'll have before you for review in early 2023. A quick update on service ridership. We are continuing to see slow but incremental growth in ridership, averaging well above 100,000 weekly boardings now. We actually hit 18,000 daily boardings in July, which was our highest one-day total since March 2020. We are making 97 to 98% of our directly operated weekday service through active dispatch, voluntary overtime, and our great staff. As was covered with Sophie earlier in the meeting, we have ambitious service growth targets reflected in the TDP, and we have aggressive recruitment efforts underway to support our ability to meet those goals. Staffing is the #1 issue challenging the industry overall. A recent American Public Transit Association report indicated 92% of transit agencies in the country are having difficulty fully staffing their services. So we have a comprehensive recruitment effort underway for coach operator trainees, for journey mechanics, and for other key positions. Employee engagement is leading a coordinated effort across multiple departments. It really is an agency-wide effort to attract and retain talent into the agency to support our growth goals. We have hired 75 people so far this year. And in addition to that, we've had 45 internal promotions. So we're seeing a good response, but we need to keep it up if we want to be able to support our growth plans for not only 2024, but beyond through 2027. Quick COVID update. We had 35 cases in July. That was our 3rd highest. My written report says we've had 1 so far in August, and I have to update that to say we've had 2 so far in August. Employees are reporting mild symptoms and are coming back pretty quickly. We are continuing to use the toolkit we have available to us. We're strongly recommending masks on the service for employees, for customers, for visitors to our campus here and meeting rooms. And the Ashway testing site is still active and still a resource for the community of testing 150 to 200 people a day during its operations. So we'll stay at it and continue to live with the virus. Finishing up on a financial note, the state audit is almost concluded. The board will be notified soon of the exit conference being scheduled. The state auditor has recommended that our 2022 annual accountability audit be deferred till 2023, which is a first and is very interesting. And this reflects Community Transit's 26 consecutive years of clean audits. The auditor has cited workload, other work with other agencies and local governments that have been recipients of so much federal relief funding. So we're taking a year off from the compliance audit, and I think that's positive news. On the other hand, the audit lottery landed on us in a different way. We've been selected by the federal government as one of 100 randomly selected local transit agencies in receipt of CARES Act funding for an audit being led by the Office of Inspector General on the Federal Integrity Payment Audit System. So we'll be sharing our records with the Department of Transportation. It's notable that the FTA Region 10 office is also subject to that audit. So the IG's office is looking at how the regional FTA offices disperse funds to local grantees and then how those funds are used. So we will respond to that as well and expect no issues there. So Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So the audit that we get from the state, we have to pay for it. Do we have to pay for the one from the federal government?
I don't know if Lori's in the room. I'm told that the Congress provided funding for the IG to do these audits of CARES Act funding and that they've retained an outside auditor. So I can get back to you and let you know whether we have any obligation there.
I had one quick question. Back when you were talking about visiting around, looking at what other transit places were doing for zero emissions, you mentioned the one that had been doing electric for 10 years. I missed where that was.
That's Wenatchee,
Oh,
Lake Transit in Wenatchee. Yeah, it might be fun for us to organize another visit over there. They've got a pretty impressive operation and they're able to cover a network that has some service characteristics similar to some of ours. And they're using a fully electric fleet. Their goal is to be fully electric by 2028.
So, okay, I'll ask later. I was just going, I don't need to take the time, but I'm interested in what they're doing for charging too.
Sure.
And because I know we're going to decide what kind of battery or whatever we're going to use, but charging is going to be an issue too.
Yes, we'll have a full report for you later this year.
Okay, excellent. Okay, next item is our committee reports, and I'm first with the executive committee. The executive committee met on Wednesday, July 20th. Mayor Marine, Councilmember Morrell, Councilmember Daughtry, and I attended. The CEO provided his report. The committee reviewed updated resolution number 12-22, the emergency authorization, and recommended it to be placed as an action item on today's meeting agenda. An executive session was called for a labor update. The committee was briefed on the upcoming APTA Transform Conference in Seattle, October 9 through 12. Board members interested in attending are asked to notify Rachel. The next executive committee meeting is scheduled for August 18th at 11:30. And strategic alignment and capital development. Councilmember Merrill.
Yes, the Strategic Alignment and Capital Development Committee meeting was held remotely over Zoom on Wednesday, July 27th, 2022 at 2 p.m. The meeting was attended by Councilmember Merrill and Labor Representative Lance Norton. Absent were Mayor Marine, Councilmember Mead, and Councilmember Wright. We reviewed two items and forwarded them forward for action on today's board agenda. First is resolution number 1122, updating the Van Pool Grant Program, and will be presented by, I'm not sure, Jennifer Haas not being here today. The second was resolution 16-22, revising the corporation's fare structure, and will be presented by Chris Simmons, manager of system planning. The committee forwarded the Innovative Services Program update presented earlier in today's meeting. And the staff briefed the committee on the long range plan phase 2 outreach, quarterly ridership data, and zero emission study. Next meeting of the Strategic Alignment and Capital Development Committee is Wednesday, August 17th at 2 p.m. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the Finance Performance and Oversight Committee, and that will be me. We met on Thursday, July 21st, 2022 via Zoom. Board members Christine Fitzell, John Neary, Sid Roberts, and I attended. Consent items on today's agenda is approval of June 2022 monthly expenditures and payroll, items C through G on the agenda. Award of ITB 2022-032, supply and delivery of lubricants for buses, item B on the agenda. Action items, consideration of resolution number 15-22, rules of conduct action, item D. Reports, safety and security update. As part of the monthly safety and security update, the committee received a briefing on the status of the contract between Community Transit and the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office for transit police officers. No changes are anticipated at this time. June 2022 sales tax report. And June 2022, Community Transit collected approximately $15.9 million in sales tax revenue, approximately $1.2 million more than budgeted. June sales tax collections reflected purchases made in April 2022. The June 2022 diesel fuel update and report. The budget team continues to closely monitor fuel costs as fuel prices continue to increase. Year to date through June 2022, Community Transit paid an average of $3.91 per gallon for diesel fuel compared to the 2022 amended budget amount of $3.33 per gallon. This was a negative variance of 58 cents per gallon. Resolution number 1222, update. The committee reviewed an updated version of resolution number 12-22, providing CEO emergency management authority during an emergency or disaster. The committee supported the updated resolution going to the full board for action. The item was forwarded to today's board meeting by the executive committee. The next Finance Performance and Oversight Committee meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m. Thursday, August 18, 2022 via Zoom. Okay, we are now down to the consent items. Can I get someone?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, items A through G.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Now we're down to the big part today, action items. Resolution 11-22, updating the Van Pool grant program, and that's rolling.
I'll just do an introduction, so solving the mystery here on who's presenting. So the board's familiar with the agency's Van Pool grant program. You may know it as Van Go. It's always a popular event in which we grant surplus vehicles to nonprofits in the community in Snohomish County. And Kristen Ryan is here. She's our Van Pool customer service and sales specialist, and she's going to describe proposed changes to the program that will be allowed to be more responsive to community needs. And just thank you, Kristen, for standing in today for Jennifer.
The Van Go program was started in 2000 when the board of directors unanimously approved the program to assist community organizations servicing those affected by service cuts. Since 2000, Community Transit has granted 170 vehicles to nonprofit organizations through the Van Go grant program. The original resolution allowed for up to 12 surplus vehicles to be granted per year to nonprofit organizations within our public transit benefit area. This was a reasonable number in past years. However, the last few grant cycles have shown an increased demand for these vehicles to meet our community transportation needs. We recommend eliminating the cap listed in the original Van Gogh resolution so that we can provide more flexibility during years when we have a larger number of surplus vehicles to grant. The number of vehicles will be aligned with the agency's transit asset management plan. We are also recommending that we expand eligibility to also include state agencies, tax-supported educational agencies, tax-supported municipalities or political subdivisions, qualified emergency shelters, and of course, nonprofit organizations, all located within our public transit benefit area that service those with transportation needs. This will allow us to expand the reach of the program to a wider network of existing organizations servicing our common community. Retired community transit vans have sold at auction for an average of $6,400 per vehicle over the past 5 years. By granting these vehicles to community groups, they can continue to provide many times that value in transportation services. Our recommendation is to approve Resolution 1122, removing the limit on the number of vans that can be granted each year through the van grant program, as well as expanding program eligibility. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
You just said to remove the limit, but it's still within the asset management program.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
I have kind of a strange question. So when we donate to those nonprofits and we don't take them to auction to make the 6,500, do we get a tax deduct on that?
You don't pay taxes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we don't pay taxes.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, but the answer still stands. I mean, come on, do we get something back from this?
Okay, no, I think it's great. I'm totally thrilled and excited that we're going to expand those. I know there's a great need out there. The one line that you read that said political parties, what does that include?
That basically just brings our resolution to match the other resolutions for community transit surplus programs.
Oh, okay.
It just matches the others.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Christian, I'm just curious, we do have adequate room to store additional vehicles from the normal or the routine of 12 annually, is that correct?
You mean storage wise here?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, we have the space.
I think we do, because one of the reasons that we purchased that property was to have a training center and additional storage, right? The other question I have, so we have adequate storage, it's not like we ain't got any place to put them. The qualified emergency shelters providing assistance to homeless persons. Explain that to me. Sounds like it's easy to figure, but.
Well, most of those would be already 501c3 nonprofits, but in some cases during like national emergencies and things like that, other places can be designated as an emergency shelter.
Oh, these are emergency shelters?
Correct.
That's how, I'm just not sure what we're doing with the homeless people. We're bringing them to shelters with the additional vans.
So we are not, we would be
No,
grant,
no.
oh yeah.
No, that's, sorry, it's always we. There's others. I see. So that's what we'll be doing for those homeless people, right?
Right, they provide transportation to and from shelters and in a lot of cases like DSHS centers and places like that, that they need to get to as part of, you know, the program that they're a part of through the shelter.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, next action.
Do you want to take action on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Okay. I need a motion for approval of resolution 11-22.
I recommend the board of directors approve resolution 1222 to allow the chief executive officer authority to implement that's wrong one, sorry. 1122, superseding resolution number 802, Van Gogh grant program to expand program eligibility to qualified organizations as defined in resolution number 0804 and give authority to the chief executive officer to identify the number of surplus vehicles allocated to grant each fiscal year for the Van Gogh program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, resolution 12-22, the emergency management, CEO Eldon Fritz, you are on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Joined today by John Holdsworth, our safety manager for Q&A. If needed, I'm going to just briefly report on how we've followed up since the board's last discussion of this issue. So at the previous board meeting, the board had a robust discussion of resolution 12-22, which we brought forward initially to update our emergency response policy to reflect lessons learned and better equip us to respond to future emergencies. The board referred the resolution back to the executive committee for further consideration and refinement. Between that meeting and the executive committee, I met with several of you, discussed the issues that had been raised at the board meeting, and fed that feedback back to executive committee members in that next executive committee meeting. The executive committee adopted a substitute resolution that made 3 refinements to the original draft. It amended the original draft to specify that when the CEO declares an emergency and sees a need to extend that emergency, that it would that the CEO would seek the board's concurrence in an extension of an emergency proclamation every 90 days, and then every 90 days thereafter. So this really strengthens the connection between the staff and the board in managing through a future emergency. In addition, the resolution specifies that if the CEO makes any personnel policy changes during an emergency declaration, the CEO seeks the board's concurrence in those changes at the next available board meeting. And then finally, it builds in essentially an after-action report that when an emergency is over and an emergency proclamation is no longer in effect, that the CEO do a after-action report, reporting on lessons learned, reporting on any policy changes that were made, and recommending which of those, if any, should remain in effect or sunset, as the case might dictate. So those are the 3 refinements that the executive committee discussed and incorporated into resolution 12-22. The committee discussed that and unanimously recommended that the board take that up with a due pass recommendation. So the recommendation is that the board approve resolution number 12-22 to allow the CEO authority to implement emergency management during an emergency, a disaster, or an incident. Thank you.
Was he going to speak?
John's here for Q&A.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I thought he was going to present something. So does anyone have any questions on that?
Just a comment. I appreciate the work that the staff and board members put into crafting policy that works for everybody. I mean, that's the way this should work. And it doesn't, I mean, a lot of times everything is just hunky-dory, but sometimes there's things we have to work on. I appreciate the maturity of the players to kind of sit down and work this out and get a piece of policy that I think is good for the agency. So I'm grateful for that.
Well, I am thrilled that we do have a policy because, first of all, no one could have anticipated anything like what we've just gone through and are still going through. But being in the oh-so-slide situation with the city with no plan and no authority, it really hits home that we all need to have something, and I'm glad that we have something that carries on after we get through the pandemic. So I thank you for all that work and getting it coming out right. So if there are, oh, one more question?
No, I'm ready to move the motion.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Questions. Okay. Any other questions? I don't want to Okay, I move that the Board of Directors approve resolution number 12-22 to allow the Chief Executive Officer authority to implement emergency management during an emergency, disaster, or incident.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, our next action item is resolution 16-22, revising the corporation's fare structure of the free youth fair, and Chris Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No flashy presentation this time. We're going to get right to it. I think you guys have seen this enough over the last 30 days. Just a quick reminder that this is part of our eligibility package to be eligible for grants out of the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package. We estimate that we will be giving up roughly $500,000 in fare funding to receive at the end of the day about $12 million annually from the state as a result of moving this policy forward. You were at the last minute provided both the final comments, since the period closed on August 1st. All of the public comments regarding the fare policy change, we roughly received about 50 of those comments. And the generalization of those comments doesn't change from what I've reported to you in the past. Basically, you have a side that is said this is a good idea for our community's youth for transportation purposes and being able to get them where they need to go, as well as training those future riders of the system. And another segment of the community that is concerned about how this shifts our costs and potentially onto other revenue sources for our system, and encourage concern about the safety issues that young folks may face on the system as well under a shift with this fare. We also provided, again, last minute, and our apologies, so very quickly, a Title VI analysis where we showed that there was no disparate impact or disproportionate burden on any community as a result of this policy. So with that, I believe the committee moved forward a do pass recommendation, and I will turn it back over to you for any questions or moving forward.
Anyone have any questions on that?
I do.
Go ahead.
I was a little too close to the microphone. Scared myself there for a moment. I'll tell you what I'm really concerned about. When this gets up and running, the process of, the young people 18 and under riding for free, we're just getting occasionally stories about not being able to get those that will be eligible for the free ride, that the buses start to turn into the motel on wheels. I looked about the requirements, and those that won't be able to ride or will be asked to leave. I worry about the transit operators particularly. And I think after a while, once some of these folks that are up to no good, if you will, learn that it's going to be rather difficult for them to be taken off a bus. Unless we are committed to have the sheriff's department at times somewhere down the road, perhaps, maybe needed to ride these buses in certain areas where the ones that don't quite want to find or obey the rules get off the bus. I hear drivers now saying that they got dizzy. They were back there doing drugs. They don't get off the bus. There's gangs chasing each other. We all hear the horrific stories almost on a daily basis. But the vehicle maintenance people that are cleaning up needles and whatnot from those that are riding buses and not getting off. I just worry about the security of the operators and of course those, as I just said, from vehicle maintenance cleaning up. I understand there's going to be these plexiglass what do you call them? Sheltering of the operators?
The barriers, driver barriers, basically.
Yeah, the driver barriers, which I can tell you for sure, not everybody's in favor of that. But if it's going to be done, I guess it's going to be done on every bus. But I don't want to see come late November, early December, the fact that we are having operators in trouble because of what's happened on their buses and the experiences they've had to go through. I drove a bus for 36 years, although I was fortunate in the years when I started that the students got on a bus and the drivers and the students all got along. This was service from New Jersey into New York, and so these were high ridership routes. And I wondered today, you know, as a parent having the best wife in the world that raised 6 children of ours, we told them about responsibility. I think in some cases here, the entitlement or those that are going through the formidable years start to feel that they're entitled to just about everything. And now I've got my own bus. And I understand a lot of people, you know, it's a benefit. They raise their children correctly. But there are others, I think, that will take what we're trying to do away with a positive note. But just, I won't go on any longer. But I hope that we will get support, and I'm sure we will, from our good Sheriff's Department when times come, should we need their assistance, that there will be a prompt and considered response to what is going on. Thank you for listening.
I'll just say the staff has been concerned with many of those issues as well, but we've tried to separate those issues in terms of conduct on the buses into the upcoming resolution for the rules of conduct versus the fare policy, which is its own set of policy in terms of payment. So your concern has been noted by staff, but I'll also say there's another process coming right behind this that deals with it.
Yes, anyone else with a question? Okay, can I get a motion for approval?
I move that the board. I move that the Board of Directors approve resolution number 16-22, revising the corporation's fare structure.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, appreciate that. So now we get into the really deep stuff on this. Resolution 15-22, rules of conduct.
Well, good morning, board. Good to see you again. Jacob Altier, Manager of Security and Emergency Management here at Community Transit. I guess in this particular meeting, I have the hard job of really outlining some of the rules and some of the steps we're taking to ensure we're prepared for all riders, but especially obviously for youth riders, given our previous presentation. So the presentation I'm going to go over today is similar to what we did at Finance, Performance, and Oversight, to provide you kind of a high-level review and answer any questions and ask for potential action by you at the end. So really the rules of conduct have several key objectives. You know, we want to have safety and security for our employees, our customers, and our contractors. We want to address current gaps between our existing rules and our existing procedures. We want to ensure that we're equitable in how we roll out a rules of conduct, and that they're actually operationally feasible, that they're going to work for people in the
Sorry, that was me.
Okay, people in the field, and then ensure that we're able to communicate those expectations to customers and enforce those rules when needed. So they're not only going to be governing customers, although that's obviously the primary target as far as communicating the rules, but any individual on our property would be expected to follow our rules of conduct, like visitors to our operating bases might be a good example of that as well. So as far as how we got to where we are, we started by just looking at our existing rules. And we kind of have 3 buckets of existing areas that were lessons learned that we considered when proposing these rules of conduct. First, we looked at things that are not necessarily crimes, but they happen in our system. There's a list there from sexual harassment to mutual fighting to racial slurs directed at staff or other customers. And we tried to make sure that we were addressing those in our proposed rules of conduct so that both our staff, but also our transit police have additional mechanisms to be able to gain compliance. We also looked at rules as, do we actually need this rule? Is this something that we need from an equity lens or an operational lens? And some examples of rules that we currently don't allow in practice that we would actually allow should the rules of conduct be adopted is eating. As shocking as it is, you can't eat on our buses. Pets on commuter buses, we allow pets on all of our other buses, just not commuters. So trying to make sure that we're looking at rules from the lens of what do we not need anymore. And then lastly, kind of at the bottom, we have things that we don't allow in practice, such as smoking or injecting drugs or substances, or using drug paraphernalia that we didn't really codify in a policy. So again, we want to ensure that staff have the ability through these rules to be able to address the challenging environment that they deal with every day so professionally. So in drafting these rules of conduct, we also looked at regional partners across the region, from King County Metro to Sound Transit, to also national partners like TriMet, LA Metro, BART, to really look at how other agencies adopt proposed rules of conduct and how they go about enforcing those. We also looked at other public settings, not just transit. We looked at the Seattle Public Library. In other words, what are other environments where the public goes that need to be regulated as far as some of the conduct issues go? And then lastly, we looked at our insurance company's best practices, which has a document that's developed with transit agencies across the state to really meet our best practices. The other thing we did is we considered guidance from the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services as it relates to youth, and how can we be prepared should more youth ride our bus with your previous actions. So we also took into account some of the guidance there. In getting here, it was almost a 2-year effort, a lot of meetings, a lot of collaboration from across the company. We did focus groups with frontline staff to really ensure that our proposed rules are going to meet the operational needs of our employees. We invited our union partners to be in those same meetings to ensure that we were being proactive and inclusive in our approach. We did equity reviews by the county, as well as working with our executive leadership team to make sure that they were comfortable with it as well. So a very collaborative process over the last almost 2 years. Specific to youth fair, I just wanted to call out this one section because of the fact that your previous action, this is a proposed rule in the rules of conduct that particularly relates to youth. And we are slightly more conservative in our approach to this proposed rule than some of our regional partners. We felt like that was the right thing for our system, especially given our operating environment and some of our more rural routes, that we wanted to have clear guidelines or clear rules, excuse me, for youth on our service. And we also consulted with our legal and our insurance company to ensure they're reasonably comfortable with this approach as well. So while it's a little bit more conservative than our regional partners, it's in the same spirit of really a lot of our regional partners' approach to youth on their buses. So I think as we talked about in the memo, we went to finance performance oversight. We'd asked that you adopt the rules today. Should you agree to that, we will work to immediately have our CEO approve a policy that implements those rules of conduct. When we worked over the last 2 years, we not only worked on this actual rules of conduct, but we also worked on the policy. So those same group of people that collaborated with us over these last 2 years also collaborated on the actual policy language as well, so that we're ready to implement it should you proceed with adopting it. Lastly, once Rick signs it, we then need to begin the rollout. Customer communication, we're already working with our marketing communications team to ensure we're communicating the rules in a manner that customers can be receptive to. We're looking at facility signage, we're looking at employee training, and then looking at updating our procedures and our contracted service providers' procedures to ensure they're ready to implement them as well. With that, there's a proposed action on there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, I got one. Go ahead. As I read through this, I think this is good work, and I don't see a thing in there that I object to. Almost all of it would be common sense that we'd hope most people would be adhering to now. So if we begin telling customers this, and they're the folks that aren't obeying now, what's the other steps in tending towards enforcement are we looking at above and beyond what we do now?
Yeah, so we're actively in discussions with the executive leadership team and Rick to look at what additional strategies we may look to support enforcement in the future from a security staffing model. As our current practice is, our employees can ask somebody to leave the bus if they're violating our rules. Should they refuse to get off the bus, we would call our transit police to assist in excluding them formally and nudging them to get off that bus. So that existing process would continue. The advantage though is we would have all those additional rules that would make clearer our expectations.
If I may add to Jacob's response, so separate and apart from the youth fair question and the development of these rules of conduct, we've been reporting to the board regularly since the beginning of the year on our in-year efforts to increase our security presence in the field. And you've been hearing at the committees and here in the boardroom about the development of a safety and security strategic plan. That plan is going to come through the board for review in September and will inform some of our proposals in the fiscal 2023 budget proposal that you'll receive in October. So we're going to continue with our elevated security presence in the field with the resources we have this year. But you'll see a plan and some proposals for elevating our level of resource commitment to safety and security in the budget a little bit later this year.
So if you could please help me understand the difference. I'm seeing a dichotomy here of the slide that talks about youth supervision at 10 and under and the youth and actually having a youth fair. Because if I have the way I'm reading this is I look at this as if I had a 10-year-old, I wanted him to take the bus to the library, but I would have to go with him or her. Is that correct or not?
If you're under the age of 10, then you would have to have an appropriate person supervising you. That may be another adult, that may be a parent or guardian, or that could be another youth. So you might have a 16-year-old older sister who's mature enough to babysit that person, so to speak, and they would ride the bus with them. But under the proposed rule, if you're under the age of 10 without somebody with you, it would be prohibited under the proposed rules of conduct.
So how do we propose for our transit bus drivers to understand who's under 10? I mean, we've had this discussion before. How are we going to understand if a student is 19, looks 16, that kind of thing? Is there any way we're going to be able to know the person's 10 or less?
So we are actively working on the procedures of how we would implement the youth fair, particularly as it relates to coach operators interactions. But I do not anticipate at this point that there will be any dramatic change to our existing practice of coach operators concentrating on not getting into disagreements over fare in order to ensure that they're not putting themselves at risk over fare disputes. However, if somebody potentially boarded the bus and the operator was concerned that maybe they're a child of vulnerable age, they could certainly call a supervisor to come assist them. And if, depending on that age, transit police could also be requested to assist them. So for instance, if you had a 6-year-old get on the bus and the coach operator was concerned, they certainly could have additional resources that they could call upon to see how best to support that potential person. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I wonder, and the youth fair thing that comes from the state that says, you can't get any funding from the state because if you don't have the youth fair, I don't really buy into that very much. I think this is a good idea to do even without that. And it also leads to other things like, okay, I'm 75 years old, why don't I get free? So we'll talk about that later. And I'm not 75 yet. It's just around the corner. But, the thing I'm worried about is, or not worried about, the thing that I don't understand is how do we get away with the youth fair thing and have to have a supervised 10-year-old on it? Okay, they're free, but the adult's not, that kind of thing. I mean, I understand 13, but you have to hear 13 years old or at least looks able to take care of the 10-year-old. I understand that, and they could be free, but I'm just wondering if we're gonna run into some problems with the state over this, over just this one thing.
From my understanding and talking with the presenters you just had regarding the youth fair, we don't envision that we would run into any conflicts with the way we plan on implementing that. And it's reasonably in line with what the other transit partners are doing across the region.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time.
Anyone else with a question? Okay, I've got one. I actually read the whole thing. And this doesn't have anything to do with youth fairs, but in it, it listed out all these procedures for groups that rent our park and rides or things, and free speech and all that. And all the years I've been here, I wasn't aware that people were renting our park and rides, and there was an issue with marching with signs and interfering. So is that something we have? I mean, and it must be an issue for it to be included, but I wasn't aware that this
Yes,
ever come
ma'am.
up at a board meeting.
I will try to speak to this, but Rachel is actually the expert as well, so I'm sure she's capable of answering more questions as well. But we do have an existing board resolutions that authorize other entities using our space for limited amounts of time. And that does happen, fairly regularly. As far as, we also have a separate process for which individuals can request to exercise their First Amendment rights on our property. That happens very, very limitedly, but it's important that we have that resolution in place so that if somebody does want to exercise those rights, then we have some mechanisms to consider that, approve that, and then work to support their constitutional rights of free speech. I don't know if you wanted me to add anything, Rachel.
Oh, okay. I learned something new today. No, I am, and in fact, that sounds really good to me to know that you were thinking ahead and had something in place for, especially now that it seems to be happening. And trust me, I've been on those walks down those streets carrying a sign. So at least we're prepared. Thank you. Appreciate your so much work on this, and it was a lot. Okay, do I have someone who can make a motion?
All right, I'll do it. The board of directors, I recommend action as board of directors approve resolution number 1522, providing the chief executive officer authority to implement the agency's rules of conduct.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you.
I also want to state for the record that I'm appalled that the human condition has led us to this kind of stuff. I think that you were right, Lance, that we're in a different era here. People aren't quite as civil as they used to be, and it's too bad.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting learning experience. And for the staff here, unfortunately, it's going to be more work until we get some of those things worked out. Because allowing all of a sudden that many kids on buses without supervision is going to be issues. I live my life doing it. So,
If I may,
yeah,
just
go
by
ahead.
way of comment, I want to thank the board for its comments and Lance, your eloquence with the interests of our employees at heart. I think you hit it on the head, Madam Chair. It's going to be a learning experience. This is a bold and different policy change. We're going to let all youth ride for free now. And that's new territory for us. It's new territory for most of the transit agencies in the region. So we are going to have to monitor this very closely. We're going to have to learn how it goes in the first months and year. And if we have to make adjustments to these rules and change the way we're administering this, then we will be right back here with you talking about that and letting you know how it's going and whether we have any recommendations for refinements. The other side of this coin is that the state is now a major investor and stakeholder in the success of our system. They're making the largest ever investment in state resources in our local transit agency. So we have some additional resources to work with as a result of that. But we also have that resource to go back to if we find that there are issues with the way the state rendered the policy. So we'll be in regular feedback with our legislative delegation and with WashDOT on this as well. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's an opportunity to help families have more mobility options. And it'll no doubt be complicated in the doing, but it's a challenge we're up for, and we will let you know how it goes.
Yeah, I think, and I'm looking forward to that safety report because we all read the newspaper. We know everyone's having issues out there with the homeless, and the buses and rails seem to be hit really hard. And we're going to have to look at that, and especially with the sheriff's department cutting back the number that we had is not good. So, but we are definitely on top of it. So you guys are going to be thrilled. The next item is the chair's report, and I have nothing. So is there any last things before we adjourn? We have no executive session. Okay. Oh, board communications. Sorry about that. So Tom, do you have anything?
I don't have anything, Stephanie. Thank you.
Okay. Kim?
I'd like to thank Transit or Community Transit for their the ability to change their route slightly in Lake Stevens for the Aquafest we just ran over the weekend. Thank you very much for that. I know we do it every year. Well, we haven't done it in 2 years, but we do it every year. So as far as I could tell, because I was down there from last Wednesday until Monday, that it went well. And I was really surprised that at 5:15, Community Transit went right through my event. We were pulling down and he was there and ready to go. So got it right on time. So it was great.
So Sid?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up also on something that Lance said. When I was a kid, it's been a while, but when I was a kid, our parents used to put us on, the bus to go to other cities. We would travel 100 miles by ourselves at 8 and 10 years old. And our society's changed, and we do have to be thinking safety. And on the note of safety, I mentioned this at the Finance Committee meeting. I see some benefit potentially in a hybrid approach to safety. By that I mean our sheriff's office is understaffed, and I just wonder at some point if we might think about other ways to staff safety on our buses, increase the numbers. And I don't really know beyond that. I don't have any real data to go on, but just think that bodies are what's going to take on buses to help them be safe. We're having a great week in Stanwood. It's the week of the fair and the parade and National Night Out, and it's all good in Stanwood. So come up and see us if you get a chance. Thank you.
Okay, Christine? Did you have anything?
No, I have nothing to add. I might have to come see, might have to head up to to Stanwood there.
Come on up, you're welcome to make flowers.
Stephanie, did you have anything?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, was that everybody? Rachel, did I get? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have anything?
I guess I talk so much you don't want to hear anymore, right? I just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to my concerns today. But in addition to that, I'm going to tell you a little thing. We have an outstanding staff here at Community Transit. I'm always very generous in my compliments to their efficiency and how nice everyone is. But while I was reading a lot of these resolutions and whatnot over the years that was included in the packet, I seemed to find the same person's name on so many of them. And when I came in, I sat next to Al and I told Al about that. And Al said, Lance, when I started here, it was 1976. I know, and I thought, we honor people so deserving of it so many times. And this quiet man, who he and I, a number of years ago, because I've been on this board a long time, didn't exactly hit it off in the beginning. He's nodding his head, but I've forgiven him.
Go ahead.
And I just wanted to say, he's a great guy. I mean, he knows the history here, and he's a very personable man. I know his son Matt, who's a good guy too. But I just wanted to pay a little tribute to this man for, was it 46 years on that quick math of being, you know, there's longevity for you, right? Anyhow, thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I would be curious to find out if he's the longest staff person we've got.
Technically, I was the first person paid from community transit funds. I was hired in January of 1976. I was city attorney for the city of Everett at that time. And that's how I got involved, because we were looking at a countywide bus system that included the city of Everett. And the city council didn't want a countywide bus system. Vic sued and went down to the legislature and figured out a gerrymandered way to put buses in the county without having Everett as a part of it. So I was hired in January, and then Vic sued, who was actually the first chief executive officer or CEO, was actually working for community transit and spearheaded the effort. But he was on a federal grant fund to the city of Mount Lake Terrace. So.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service. Okay, do we have any other business? Oh. Yeah, do we have any alternates that have anything for us? I can't see who all is here. Okay. Okay, well, if that's everything, then we are adjourned.